Whether you are married or you dream of marriage one day, we are going to be talking about practical ways that you can communicate, that you can heal, that you can get rid of resentment, all the things so that you can have a loving, laughing, and longevity-based marriage. Hello, ladies and gents, and welcome to this week's episode of the Bought and Beloved podcast. As always, it's your girl, Kirby Kelly, back at it again. And we are in a studio. We are in a studio space. Unlike my normal studio space, we're actually in a professional one today. And I'm shooting with one of my friends who I've had on my podcast not once, not twice. This is the third time that we have Irene Rollins joining us on the pod. How are you doing?
I'm great. Today is such a good day. So I'm just happy to be here. Honored to be back with you. You're one of my faves.
You're one of my faves.
Yeah.
And you recently wrote a book with your husband.
Yes, we did.
Is it out yet, or when does it come out?
It is out. It released last week.
Oh my gosh.
Yep. And it was number one on Amazon with alcoholism and recovery.
Whoa.
And it was marriage and family counseling or whatever. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Well, that doesn't surprise me, considering it's a book about marriage and relationships. But that's amazing, especially for recovery. Just knowing your testimony. If y'all haven't seen those episodes, I'll link them down below, because we talk a lot about her story of overcoming addiction, battling addiction, and just freedom from that. We did a series whenever I released my book on it, because my mom and my dad struggled with addiction. And your marriage has been able to just stand the test of time, but more so just the test of life and humanity. And
oh yes, 25 years now. We've been married. Yeah.
Did y'all recently celebrate 25 years?
In June.
Oh
yeah.
gosh.
So it's crazy. I can't believe it. When you just get married, you do not see 25. Like, it's like never going to happen. You know what I mean? It's like so far away. And it's like, I'm here. I'm like, okay. It's so
cool,
good though. Yeah. 3 kids. Thank you. I'm an empty nester.
Are you really?
Yes.
Oh my
19, 22, and 23.
Okay, cool.
My kids. Yep.
Oh man.
So it's pretty
And
cool.
how's life been?
Life has been good. We're new to Dallas. We just moved to Dallas.
We're neighbors now.
Yes, which is so awesome because we can see each other in person. And we are just getting used to this place. I like it. It's a food heaven. There's
That's the thing
tons of
about
good food choices
Dallas food culture.
here.
Ain't nothing like it.
Oh, yes. Food and coffee.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Richard's a big coffee person. So
Yeah.
I'm not so much, but I'm a food person.
Gotcha.
So.
And it's also really good for Lyme disease treatments, because I have Lyme disease, got diagnosed with that this year. So I have all my sweatshops, like all my hyperbaric treatment, all my treatment options are a dime a dozen here in Dallas. So I'm grateful.
That's awesome. Well, I'm glad that you're in a place where you actually have access to the things that you need.
Yes.
Because that's so important. We were talking just before the podcast, and one of my old roommates has Lyme's disease, and I cannot imagine just knowing. I don't think enough people actually like know about the ins and outs of it, because there is kind of like confusion to it. I think even for the people who suffer with Lyme's disease, of like, I didn't even realize I had it until years later, because it's just like so sporadic and chaotic at times. But my heart goes out to y'all.
Thank you so much. I'm believing God for a miracle recovery, but I'm doing all the things that I need to do to get myself well. So
as we should. We're going to trust the Lord, and we're going to hope for a miracle.
Thank you.
But there's, like you said, we got to take care of ourselves too. Stewardship. Just
Stewardship
even if you're healthy, stewardship of your body. But we are here today specifically to talk about the book that you and your husband came out with, called 2 = 1. And I love the subtitle for it: A Marriage Equation for Love, Laughter, and Longevity. So I feel like this is like the most basic question to ask anybody with a book, but what inspired you, both of you, to write the book? Because I know that you do a lot of ministry together.
Yes.
So have you written a book before together, or is this the first?
No, this is our first book together.
Okay, cool.
And we had to do it. Because we have been traveling, speaking the past 6 years, just about in the marriage space, educating people on marriage and how to overcome hard stuff. So like, marriage is already hard. Like it's just, but
two people coming together.
Yes. Two completely different people with different upbringings, different baggage. You don't know when that baggage is going to show up in the present. Yes.
Literally.
It picks and chooses like when it's going to show up. You don't know when you're going to be triggered. And it's like, what are you going to do with it? How are you going to communicate about it? God created marriage so that we could redeem and heal one another. That's what the essence of the love of God is. It redeems, it heals, it never gives up. And Jimmy and I experienced that when I got sober from alcohol. It's actually 9 years this November 12th.
Congrats.
Yes. And God has done a miracle in our home, in our marriage, in our kids. So we want to share that message with the world. And it's not just about Jimmy and Irene's story. What we've done is we've put both our voices in this book so you can hear two different perspectives of these two different people coming together to make a marriage made one. So two separate people who are equally crazy, but equally committed can make a marriage made one. So we like to say we've been married 25 years. It's been the best 9 years ever because really it was rock bottom when I went to rehab, when we started making our uphill journey of learning how to communicate, quitting codependency, quitting addiction, quitting numbing and our pain and learning to talk about it and our emotions and things like that. And it's brought such tremendous healing. So we're in good space, even with the Lyme disease. And he's married to, 25 years later, he's married to a completely different person. He was married to, when I was 21 and he was 24. But we love the versions of ourselves now more than ever.
That's so good.
Yeah. Like that agape love, like that's where we're journeying to. And you don't ever arrive at a perfect marriage, but you get to a point where it's like, I'm not leaving, I'm not going anywhere. And there's such a peace about it. I know how to get through tough seasons. Tough seasons are gonna come, but we just know how to handle them different now. So we put in the book the tools and how to do it. Like if you do the work, you will have the marriage you've always desired and dreamed of, and better.
I love it. I mean, especially because I think a lot of people, or not a lot of people, I think just a common view in the world or narrative in the world, and maybe this is different because these are worldly relationships, not godly relationships, is that as time goes on and you become new people and different people, just with life happening and maturity and everything, it's like so many people end up just growing apart and becoming different people, wanting different things, different lives. So how has that been for you two to become different people over time, but still being committed, not just for the sake of, well, we're married, so let's just stay together. But I mean, even the tagline of it, for love, laughter, and longevity. Like, I love that that's even the 3 sections that you guys go in on and that you hone in on. But how's that been? Even just navigating becoming different people together and still remaining rooted and connected in that.
It's really boils down to this journey that, okay, if we're committed to doing the work together, then the things that what most statistically, most divorces result in irreconcilable differences. So people's differences, the things that drew us to the person that, like, I loved all these things about Jimmy. Like he was assertive and I remember humorous and all these things, but not too long into the relationship,
like,
those
I don't
differences,
like this anymore.
like, I don't like that. I don't like you making me the brunt of your jokes. Like, I don't like you always being so, we talk about the tiger and the turtle, different communication styles. He's the tiger. He's like robust in his communication and loud and like large in everything, the way he communicates, his stature. And I'm the opposite. Complete opposite. So I'm the turtle. I tuck my head into my shell, and if I'm not careful, I'll stay there and I'll become resentful and never share what I'm thinking, feeling, what I need or what I want. And the deal is, if divorces are primarily because of irreconcilable differences, then how can we journey together in a way that we're growing together as we change rather than apart, learning to think together rather than thinking alike. So we're leveraging the strengths of our relationship and our personalities to better the relationship. So if we leverage the strengths and then recognize our weaknesses and leverage those too, So if the tiger is super assertive, I'm leaning into his strength, and instead of like kind of codependently letting him do all the assertive work in the relationship, I've allowed it to grow. I grow from his strength. So I have become more assertive over the years and come into my own because of Jimmy's strength, and vice versa. And so we talk about in the book, like the journey of what that looks like, because it's not like cookie cutter, like super easy.
Oh yeah.
Like when I started asserting myself, I was out of moderation, for lack of a better word. So I was a little too much because I was learning how to be assertive.
Yep.
And, and he had to figure out, okay, what is she doing? Is she disrespecting me? Is she, whatever. So there's a lot of like yin and yang back and forth. But when you're committed to doing the work, you have grace for one another when you mess up in your communication.
Yeah.
And you leverage your strengths and weaknesses.
Something that you wrote in that specific section, you wrote that you said this to your husband. You said, "I love everything that is different about you." And you write about it in the book, or maybe he does. I don't know. You guys go back and forth, probably, right? Yeah. I say you, you're here representing 2 = 1, right? Yeah. This idea of I love everything that's different about you, and how in the very beginning, it's so easy to be like, I love everything different about you. And then you go into this stage where it's like, well, I don't really love everything different about you. And then you got back to this place of like, I love everything that's different about you. And I especially love that you brought up resentment in the book because, and I say this out of respect to both of my parents, especially my mom, but that was something in my mom that was really a hard thing for her, was resentment. And even after my parents ended up getting divorced, that was something that she held on to for a long time, was resentment for the things that my dad did in their marriage. And you talk about how this is a silent killer in marriages. So can you maybe walk through for the people who are listening, whether they're in a marriage right now, or even just the person who's like, I want to be married one day, what exactly is resentment? How is it a silent killer? And how do we go about addressing it? Not just avoiding it. Like there's a way where it's like, okay, let me like preventatively know these things and do these things. But if someone is resentful in a relationship, it's like, well, then how do they navigate that so they don't end up,
right?
I think about my mom, like literally numbing the pain. It's like, how do you navigate that?
Well, resentment at the end of the day is like a bitter root that takes so a seed of resentment takes root in our hearts and begins to grow. And it does nothing but poison you. The other person is unaware because typically we're hiding and keeping it to ourselves.
Letting it fester.
Yeah, letting it fester. Yep. And the deal is resentment is the seed also to addiction. Because that, again, it's like you said about your mom, we're going to numb our pain because resentment is inwardly painful. It's kind of like shame. Shame is inwardly painful as well. Like it causes us a disservice. It's one of those things we have to deal with it and process it in order to be free from it, in order for it not to destroy us, to cause us pain that we want to reach out and numb with something. Or if we don't deal with it in a marriage or in a relationship, it could be a friendship, then you start to drift apart. So the idea in a 2 = 1 marriage is to get back to God's design for love and marriage. It's to reconcile and to redeem and bring together. So if it is a safe place, that relationship, and we have the communication tools, which is why we say do the work with the communication. We even have a workbook to help folks through it. Like you become what you repeatedly do. So if you repeat these behaviors and these positive ways of unlearning the old way of dysfunctional thinking and processing and communicating, and you do the work to get free individually, then when you come together, it's safe enough to talk about what is hurting, what you're resentful about. And if you, in recovery, we like to say every single day we take hold of our resentments and we take inventory of ourselves. Because if we don't, we know it could lead to wanting to reach out for something to numb. So it's just critical for people to understand that it doesn't just apply to recovery, it applies to all of us, like all of our relationships. There could be very good relationships around us that we are neglecting and not reconciling differences, and they're friends, and God put those people in our lives for a reason. It's going to test you. They're going to offend you. They're going to hurt your feelings. Not if. It's a matter of when.
Yep.
So it's like, rather than letting resentment take root and you losing out on a perfectly good relationship, reconcile it, man. Learn how to talk about it.
I don't think I've even ever thought of, because the way that I've always heard like marriage, at least like painted or preached in the church, is it glorifies the Lord, which it does, and it's a representation of God and his love for the church.
Yes.
And it's like, that is true. But I don't think I've ever even thought of like, it's about coming together in love and reconciliation, and that displays the heart of God. I don't think I've ever really thought of it as this like reconciling thing. I've always thought of it as a refining thing.
Yes.
But I've never really thought of it as like a reconciling thing. Because it's like, even as you're saying that, and even with reading the book, really, it's like, wow, I think about me and Richard's relationship, and it's like, the refinement is very true, where it's like, I'm being refined daily. And it's like, I'm being refined.
Right.
I'm like, oh, did I marry this perfect person and everything is wrong with me? No. It's like, no, we're not. We both have things to work through, because we're people. But the whole reconciliation aspect of it, he does such a good job that whether he's in the wrong or if I'm in the wrong, mainly me, that he's the first one to jump to like, well, we need to reconcile this and make this right and get back on the same page. Whereas for me, it's like, well, I just want to like sit in this a little bit longer and feel justified, or I have this bitterness or whatever. And I don't know if that's just because of like seeing that in my own life.
It probably the nail is on the head. No, I was going to say that,
because it's like marriage. It's like, as much as it is a reflection of like, oh, I'm seeing myself even more clearly than I thought. It's like, oh, I'm seeing my parents in me, and which is so interesting, because I think we grew up like, I'm never gonna be like them, and then it's like, I'm exactly like them, but just in a different way.
You can't help it. You can't help it. You're going to become what you learned and what you were exposed to. So that's the gift of the reconciliation, because God put you with your husband to start a new rhythm, a new generational way of doing things and processing and healing, and unlearning those things that aren't that are causing you a disservice. Like your husband, can you picture that? Like, God put you with him. Sometimes, yes, he is not the trigger, but he triggers you
because
in
of
the
all
dysfunction. And then it's an opportunity for him to be a part of your healing. Like, that is love. That is it's not judgmental. That's when it's safe. It's not shaming. He's not shaming you with your mistakes. He's like, no, we're going to work on this together. You're being introduced to God's love, God, the functional way of loving in the kingdom of God. When we are in the family of God, we learn these new ways. And it's so amazing that God sent you this man that has the strengths that you need to grow and be the best you. There's going to be a day, you're 4 years in. There's going to be a day, 8 years in, 12 years in, you will not remember the way you behaved before, because you will be such a different person if you lean into doing the work to unlearn. And hey, this may be a season that you're being hard on yourself, that it's all me. Right. But like, I'm the same way. I felt like it was me all the time in the whole front part of our marriage. I'm like, what? It's like, we get into counseling and I'm like, it's all about well, hey, yeah, it was. Okay.
Yes, me.
However, like, what ended up happening was, there was a time that I was, on dysfunctional train because of my family of upbringing. But I learned these new behaviors, especially when I got to rehab and hit rock bottom. When I started doing that work, I began to meet Jimmy and then pass him, for lack of a better word. And I began leading the whole family in the health journey, emotionally, physically, spiritually, relationally. And then we did the work together. Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So it like evens out. It just depends on what season of life you're in.
That makes sense.
So don't be so hard on yourself, because there will be a time in your marriage where you're going to have to pick up some slack.
I remember
and
hearing
you'll be
about
ready for it.
Yeah. I remember talking with people. I think it was like right when we just got married, where it was like, people have like different views of like, what are the roles of the man? What are the roles of the woman? There's traditional roles. There's like, well, what about in a modern context and yada, yada, yada. But that was the biggest thing is like, one of you is always going to be like supporting in some way.
Yes.
And then the other person, and then it's always going to be this thing, but it's like you're moving forward together in this. And it's not, well, I'm pulling the slack or well, I'm pulling us behind, but it's like, no, we're both we're moving forward. Someone just might be a little bit ahead.
Or might be down for a season.
Exactly.
Or what have you.
It's that ebb and flow of like, but we're doing this together.
Yeah. We're both imperfect humans in need of a savior, both of us.
Exactly.
So heap grace upon each other, because you need each other in those seasons. So like when I was 2 years sober, Jimmy was in the hospital with congestive heart failure, 420 pounds. He was medicating with food. I couldn't, just like he couldn't get me to see during a season that I had a problem with alcohol. I was 2 years into my sobriety and I couldn't get him to see that he had a problem with food.
Yeah.
Well, on that hospital bed, he had this revelation that, oh my gosh, why am I not leaning into Irene's strength in recovery in this? And he asked for my help. So those moments where you're vulnerable and humble enough to say, you know what, you have the strength in this area right now. Can you help me? He did that. And now he's 160 pounds less, living his best life, loving shopping a little bit too much because his new body allows him to.
New clothes that fit me.
Yeah. So it's like, that's like a great example of that ebb and flow. You know what I mean? I'm not better than him. It's just what season do I get to be a part of his healing journey.
It's almost like that pendulum swing where it's like, okay, he might take the lead in these areas. You might take the lead in some of these areas, but nonetheless.
But we come alongside one another. It's being mutually submitted to one another. Yeah. Like marriage isn't about like, people get the theology wrong. We talk about marriage, the theology of marriage in the whole first part of the book. Because if you don't get that, like we can't.
Then you don't have a foundation to work with. Yep.
Exactly. Yep. If you think that the man is supposed to be leading in every area all the time and the wife is to submit to everything he says
and do nothing and
have no voice, then you're reading the wrong Bible. I don't know what Bible you're reading, but you don't have the essence of God meant for us two different people to come alongside and make a marriage made one.
It's a co-mission. I remember hearing a pastor one time talk about this in young adult ministry. This is before I was married, and I love the Word of God, and I'm a woman in ministry, and as someone who was like, okay, I'm gonna have to submit to my husband, I was like, I'm going to, but I literally don't know what that looks like. Also because I grew up in a household where it was a single mom and she was going about her faith journey as well. I was the one who pioneered the faith in my family, like being a Christian and everything. And I remember them talking about how like marriage, as much as it is about submitting to one another in different ways, because it's like the man is literally putting his life on the line to lead his family, as much as this woman is called to respect and honor her husband. Respect and honor goes both ways, like it does. But at the end of the day, marriage is about a co-mission, a coming together to submit under Christ.
Yes. And Romans 12:10, I love the version that says, outdo one another in honoring, serving one another, honoring one another. Like it's both ways. And that is, at the end of the day, we all want to be obedient to the Word of God. And when we're honoring one another, respecting one another, we're not going to get it perfect. Like throw that out the window. There's no perfect marriage. Jimmy and I are working on this stuff right now, every single solitary day. But yeah, the mutual submission, mutually honoring. Yeah, that's the essence right there.
A lot of humility. It takes a lot of grace and humility to do that.
Yes, it does. But it's worth it, isn't it?
100%.
Like, I honestly believe that what I want to leave my children and the gift I want to leave to your generation and generations behind me is that it is worth it. What God designed for marriage to do, it's so worth it. The peace I have, the freedom I have, the companionship I have, even the arguments that I have that are refining me. Like, I love it all. Because I don't know, I can't imagine not getting to have this level of intimacy here on earth. Like, it's going to be incredible in heaven what I have with my Father in heaven, but like here on earth I get to experience his love, his presence, all of that through the love of my spouse. And it just, it's pretty amazing. Marriage is awesome.
It is awesome, especially from a biblical worldview, because it's like marriage was created by God. And like when you do it his way and you have that foundation, like you said, the theology behind it, it's like we can actually go about this the right way now. Like we can go about this with the right intention, because I think even just relationships in general, there's like the world's definition and culture's definition and media's definition and even man's definition. But when we do it God's way, the way in which he intended it, being the author of it, it's like, not only is it going to give him the glory, it is for all of our mutual benefit. Like
100%.
Yes, the people, the husband and the wife in the marriage, but also everyone around them. Like as a society, we all benefit from that family unit being submitted and committed to Christ.
Yes. That's so good.
There was a quote in your book that I really liked. It was closer towards the beginning. And like I mentioned, the book is sectioned into 3 different sections. So you have one on love, one on laughter, which we kind of touched on, just about like communication. It's like before you can even laugh with your spouse, you need to learn how to communicate with your spouse.
Exactly.
And then there's a section on longevity. But I believe this was in your section on love, you wrote, or he wrote, the decision to be for your spouse and to work as a team has the power to transform a marriage. And I'm sure that there are people who are listening and they've either observed this in their parents or see it in themselves or preventatively just want to know, what are some obstacles that you think people need to overcome in order to show up for their spouse? Like whether that's internally, like in order to show up for this person, what do I need to overcome, or what do we need to overcome as a unit?
I think, again, it boils down to communication. So like, but it's not just communication with your spouse, it's communicating with yourself and God. So I like to, we talk about check-ins in the book. And so I feel like when you check in with yourself and you're honest with yourself, learning, and we teach you how through the book, like you learn how to connect with yourself, get honest with what you're feeling. What do you need? What do you want? Those are 2 different things. And then vice versa, your spouse is doing the same thing. Then you're checking in with God. You're, connected spiritually with your Father in heaven. You're connected with yourself. Then you go and connect with your spouse. And when you connect with your spouse, what you're doing is you are bridging that gap. You're saying, hey, this is where I am. This is what I need. This is what it looks like. And vice versa, you're leaning into your spouse to answer your question. You're saying, hey, how can I show up for you? I can't read your mind. Like, that's why you need good communication skills. Like, I couldn't say out loud what I needed and what I wanted. I was so wrapped up in codependency and family of origin issues where I wasn't allowed to talk. I wasn't allowed to say what I wanted or share an opinion, but I can do that in my marriage. So I had to learn how. Then Jimmy, on the other hand, always had an opinion, and was free to share growing up. So it was like his needs were always being talked about and being met, and mine weren't, and it was my fault. And I had to own that because I didn't acknowledge my own needs and wants. And then I had to learn how to communicate them to him. And and then if he didn't get it right, we had to make adjustments. And, we're not taking it personally anymore. We're like kind of over that phase. Like in the beginning, the immaturity was there. Yeah, we took it personally. Like if he didn't meet my needs, you should know that by now. You should, but don't stop shooting all over each other. And stop shooting all over yourself, and just recognize that if I don't communicate an expectation, then it's not valid. It has to be communicated. It has to be realistic. Like you have to evaluate all those things. It's so much work individually, but then when you check in with your spouse, they might say, you know what? I hear you on that expectation, but that's not something I'm capable of doing. Maybe there's a disability, so they physically can't do it. Maybe you don't even realize you're so disconnected. This was me with my own emotions that I would be disappointed that Jimmy didn't meet a need on Valentine's Day, right? And but I had never said it out loud.
Yeah.
And then I had, why do I even want that? And I like when I started unpacking it, I'm like, oh, because society says I should get roses. I don't even want that. I don't want him spending $100 and some on flowers that you can get for $9.99.
Literally.
A dozen roses the day before, the day after. So just don't worry about flowers. I was like, so I was expecting him to do something that and then when he would do it, I would be like, no, that you spent too much money. I would have rather had.
It was never enough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or I'd get upset that he didn't do it. So it's like, it was a lose-lose battle for him.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not fair. So that communication about expectations and being able to navigate that is like really critical to the journey. Now we finish each other's sentences. Like, I still get it wrong. Like I should have sent him a text before when I got here. I know better. I should have said, hey, there's nothing to eat at home. You need to stop and get something on your way home from the airport. Because I know that that's important to him, that I've thought of something for him to eat before he gets home. Not before he gets home, when he gets home from a long travel and ministry trip. So I love to serve him in that way. So it's not a task anymore. It's like when he communicates something that brings him joy, I don't care how small it is. I want to be the one who provides that for my spouse.
I think that's really beautiful. And it is about communication at the end of the day. I think that is like the foundational thing. And if anybody's listening and you're like, what's a practical thing that I can like begin to do with my spouse, aside from like both of y'all getting this book and maybe doing the workbook together, is just sitting down and communicating and taking the time to be like, okay, what are our expectations for one another? What are our expectations for ourselves? And how can we just begin to start with alignment there? Because communication really is, being a communications major, it's like communication makes the world go round. Like we have to be able to communicate with one another fully, honestly, kindly, gently, but truthfully as well.
And to your point, seasons change.
Yeah.
So what I need today, I might not need tomorrow.
So it is those daily check-ins like you talk about. I mean, you guys write about that in the book. And unfortunately, we don't have a lot of time left, but if there was, I mean, there's so much good stuff in this book. I literally probably asked like, 3 questions? I have 9. No, Chris, I really do. I had so many prepared. But if there's just one thing that you're like, okay, for the listeners who are listening right now, I just want to get this one thing out there that I wish I could have said. What's that one thing that you're like, oh, I want to add this before it could be about something we did talk about or didn't talk about.
Okay. So longevity. So yes, the people out there who are like, oh my gosh, I've arrived. Like I'm happy. We're good. We don't need help. I would venture to say not yet because life is going to life. Something is going to come up.
Valid.
We have people in our coaching, our marriage coaching that we do, that have been married 45 years, 50 years. They are my heroes because they are basically saying we have not arrived. Seasons are changing. Things are going to happen. And we want to have the tools in place before it happens, before we need it. So like the scenario has already been thought through, the scenario of one spouse being sick. I've been the healthy one our whole marriage. And it's only recently that I've been the one that's needed more support and help. It's been a shift and a change. I know couples that like they're empty nesters. That impacts the relationship. Then, they go through the phase of life where perhaps they're taking care of sickly parents or they're experiencing grief and death. And it's like, you've got to have tools ready because life is going to life. So if you're the person who thinks that you are good, I would say that is your warning sign that you need to lean in and do some work now.
That's good. Well, like you said, life is going to life. Like, and sometimes it doesn't happen when you expect life to happen. I didn't expect my mom to pass away in my third year of marriage. And it's like, well,
Crazy.
Now we both have to navigate this. But, and I mean, I lost my father before I was married. I was 10 years old. Yeah. But now it's like whenever we step into that season, it's still going to be different with his parents. I pray that they live a long happy, healthy, godly life. But when that season comes, it's like, as much as it's going to be something we've prepared for, it's still going to be different. So prepare what you can prepare, but have the grace and God
Yes.
in your relationship for when those seasons and times of testing come, because as much as you need to lean on each other, you both need to be standing on the firm foundation that is the rock, Christ himself.
Amen.
But I literally wish we could talk for like another 5 hours about all this stuff.
I love talking
me
to
and Richard need to come over and hang out with you and your husband.
We would love that.
We need to make it happen.
Absolutely.
But y'all need to check out this book. Again, it's already out. It's called 2 = 1 by Jimmy and Irene Rollins, A Marriage Equation for Love, Laughter, and Longevity. You can get it today. And where can people follow you and keep up to date with everything you're doing?
Sure. Irene Rollins, at Irene Rollins on Facebook, on Instagram. Jimmy is I Am Jimmy Rollins. And then our account together is Jimmy and Irene Rollins on Instagram, right? And you can get the book anywhere books are sold. And yeah, if you follow us on social media, you can find out where we're speaking and maybe attend a conference or something like that. So we love to do life with the people that we get an opportunity to minister with and for. So we do coaching as well. And if you go to 2=1.com spelt out, you can click on the link and find out about our coaching. And it's live with Jimmy and I once a month.
Oh, nice. Along
with other resources like community and Q&A and set teachings that you can watch with your spouse or a small group. So lots of fun stuff to go along with the book.
Yeah. Plenty of resources, plenty of practicals. I know we have a lot of practical people here on the pod. So go check that out. Get this book. I will link everything down below. Thank you again for being here.
Thank you for having me.
And I will see you guys here next week for another episode of the Bought and Beloved podcast. Bye.